Hello friends, for today's video we're going to be looking at episodes 5 through 9 of Apothecary Diaries. Before jumping into the specifics, just a quick heads up. Last week I did a first impressions and then I went through episodes 1 through 4 in spoilers. So I had both a non-spoiler and a spoiler section. And this week we're just going to have spoilers, so if you're wanting to avoid those, then you might want to wait before watching this. If you are somebody though that's seen the show or you're wanting to follow along, I did make a schedule and the intention is that I am now going to be doing 5 episode chunks and the videos will be released on Mondays. I do also have a list of a lot of the other shows and anime I'm going to be looking at, but with Apothecary Diaries specifically, the only day that is an exception is for the last batch of episodes, which will go up on a Sunday, as after that I am looking to rewatch Arcane Season 1 before Arcane Season 2. But all of that out of the way, let's jump into this batch of episodes. I already was loving the show just from those first 4 episodes. I thought the humor was great. I thought that the setting was really well realized and really beautifully illustrated. I was enjoying the music, and more than anything, our main character Mao Mao is just the most likable character. She's a little blunt, but also she's very respectful. She kind of tries to do everything she can to stay in line, but she has such a passion for what she does that you just want to be able to give her the opportunity to pursue that. I love this character so much. Some of the other characters, you're slowly getting to know them. You're getting to learn a little bit about the intrigue of this palace. And I do feel we expanded on all of those things within these next 5 episodes. It was very funny. It continues to be very funny. Also, I'm really loving the humor. But episode 5 specifically is titled Covert Operations. This episode kicks off with somebody having something on his hands, and it turns out to be a rash. I wasn't sure at first if it was a rash or if it was blood, but it is determined very quickly that it had something to do with the materials that he was touching that he then threw into the fire. And that is what the conclusion is that Mao Mao comes to. This doesn't seem to last very long. This isn't like some of the other cases, we'll call them, that she has had to investigate. However, it's clear that this is significant for reasons that have yet to be illuminated, because you see that Jinshi is trying to use this as an idea of how he can determine who might be looking at messages, because you see him talking to Gaoshin about this, and he wants to know, hey, is there anybody else in the palace who has these same markings? But we don't really know who that someone might be. So you can tell, okay, this is something to keep note of, to keep in the back of our minds. But speaking of Jinshi, we do see a moment where he is fighting as training, and he is very, very well built. You do kind of wonder, he just seems like he's somebody who should be managing things. Why is he needing to learn how to fight? And I thought that was notable, and then I expanded on this, which I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but in the following episode, the very first thing I wrote for the following episode, which is titled The Garden Party, is the Emperor has a younger brother. And then later, I wrote this down because it was funny, but it kind of ties all of this together. Mao Mao thinks our glittering eunuch isn't there, but who cares? Which I thought was funny, but I'm like, Jinshi's the other prince. He's the other prince. That's why he knows how to fight and why he has this skill. And I had a suspicion anyway, as soon as he was introduced. I'm like, is he not? I mean, is he a eunuch? I kind of think he's not. Maybe he actually is. I don't know. That's still up for debate. But I'm like, I just have felt like he's more important. And I'm pretty sure he's the prince. Well, I guess find that out whether I'm right or wrong as we progress. But I don't know who else it could be. It's very possible it's just somebody we haven't been introduced to yet, and maybe they'll make an appearance later, but that is my working theory. Anyway, continuing on with covert operations. So once there's something on his hands quest, you could say, has been completed, they're primarily preparing for this garden party. It's almost like an episode and a half of storyline here. And when they're getting ready, when Mao Mao's getting ready with the other ladies in waiting and Lady Gyoku, it's so cute because they're like, oh, we have to, not this part. I don't like that they want her to get rid of her freckles, because I'm like, no, they're cute. I actually wrote down, I wrote the quote, you should hide your freckles. And then I said, no, they're so cute. And then you find out, which is really devastating, that she has been purposefully trying to, I'm going to say, make herself ugly with air quotes, because freckles are not ugly. And then second, Mao Mao's adorable. But the whole thing is within their society, they have certain beauty standards that she does not necessarily fit, and then she goes out of her way to embrace those things even further. And the reason being, she has seen that when men are leaving the brothels that a lot of her friends work at, she knows that sometimes those men have decided they're not really satisfied, and then they look to people outside the brothel. And she has not wanted to have something happen, catch their attention, so she's gone out of her way to try to, again, air quotes, make herself ugly. But I really think that this just is absolutely tragic, and something I noted in the first batch of episodes is that everything is so, the word she used to describe Jinshi, I'm going to borrow here, everything is so glittering, everything's so vibrant and seemingly so beautiful, but there's always something very sinister beneath. Even the architecture of the house, the brothel, is so beautiful, and that initial view of it, it looks so glamorous. And then similarly, you could say the same thing about the palace and the concubines, but then everybody is always in so much danger that I think having this moment of her doing everything she can to try and protect herself, it just showcases that it really is surface level and that there's always something to be worried about. I did note, though, switching back into something that was amusing, that Mao Mao thinks that in order to get through these kinds of events, meaning the garden party, she thinks something like, you have to have an iron bladder, and I just said, LOL, someone's an introvert, which I can definitely relate to. I have things that I really enjoy, I have things that I love, and I do love some people, but for the most part, I kind of like time to myself, so I do really enjoy that aspect of her personality. I would enjoy that whether I connected with it or not. I just think she just feels like such a well fleshed out character, and she just has so much personality, even though she is kind of very to herself. Anyway, I just love her. I'll stop gushing. I did write also, though, with the hairpin. I didn't know what it meant initially. I was wondering, was this some kind of way for Jinshi to try and keep her protected? Is this some kind of like, this is mine, and when people see this hairpin, they'll know, oh, that's Jinshi's, don't bother her, something like that. That's not what it turned out to be, but I didn't know, so I was trying to know, like, what does that mean? I also noted when she relays her reasons for why she does what she does to her appearance, I put, Jinshi should go take some people out, because we know he knows how to fight now. He obviously has connections. He has a lot of wealth and prestige. I'm like, can he go take out all the people that would have ever made her feel unsafe? Maybe that's not the best way to go about it. I'm just saying I really like this character, and I'm maybe already a little protective of her. And I did appreciate the way he listened to her story. Anyway, moving now to officially the garden party episode. As I said, we already have gone through this theory of mine, but it was the first thing I wrote, that the emperor has a younger brother. And then also I really liked the way that they're kind of relaying to you the way that the concubines are seated, and that it's described as a proxy war. I thought that was fantastic. And then the women that, okay, the other concubine that we see Mao Mao had just helped in the previous episodes, her ladies in waiting are being rude, and a lot of the ladies in waiting are being rude just in general. And one of them sees her, and then she just starts making really weird faces at them, and then suddenly they all panic and flee, and I like that she can now just give them a look and they know to leave her alone. Also, speaking though of that concubine, I like that she gave one of the hairpins too. I thought that was really sweet. And then we are introduced to a new character. He also gives her a hairpin, and this character is kind of, they just seem like such a doofus, but it's nice that there are so many characters in this that have such drastically different personalities, and I kind of like the dynamic between them and Mao Mao. I just feel like that they're so polar opposites that it's kind of fun to see how drastically different they are. The dynamic between them is further fleshed out in the next episode, but before I touch on that, I just want to get into my final thoughts of the garden party episode. I feel so terribly for all of the other food tasters. We know, obviously, that our main character loves it. She also maybe has a interesting relationship with the feelings that one would have when they've been poisoned. She has also developed a bit of an immunity. I know, obviously, she is still impacted and affected by these things, But she certainly is more equipped to handle this than the other women. I feel so bad for them. So I just felt awful when she realizes, like, it's poison, and then she leaves, and I'm like, oh man, that sucks for anybody else that would have to do this, because very quickly, I wasn't sure when we were introducing this profession for her, I wasn't sure how long it would take before something would be poisoned. I don't know that I expected it to happen so soon. But anyway, I did enjoy that scene afterwards where she's, well, it sounds weird to say I enjoyed the scene where she's throwing up. That's not what I meant. I just meant that what happens after that, when Jinshi comes to check on her and he's like immediately taking her to the infirmary. And then she's like, is there more of the soup left? And he's like, huh? I just like how much she catches everybody off guard by wanting to ingest more of it. I always find that amusing. But anyway, switching now to the homecoming episode. I didn't really write too much about this. I more so was just taking this episode in, and I was so looking forward to her getting to see her father again, because from the first episode, I was thinking about him too, and she's thinking about him, and she's like, I hope he's doing okay. And I just absolutely am so glad that she has had the chance to go back and see him. I did also write a couple of other random things. Liaku, I put, well, he became a little bit of a loser pretty quickly, because when she goes up to him and she's trying to negotiate being able to go home, and he's like, I don't know. And then she's like, well, you could have a night with one of the, I forget what they're called, but basically like the best ladies at the brothel. And then he's like, and then he's really into what she has to say. But anyway, their dynamic, again, I feel like it's so funny, because a little bit, unless, I don't think he's a love interest. I hope I'm wrong, or excuse me, I hope I am correct that he is not a love interest. But the reason is that I was going to say they kind of have almost big brother, little sister vibes to the two of them. Hence why if he turns out to be a love interest, I'd be like, oh, never mind. But I don't think he's a love interest. The show very much seems to be setting up Jinshi as a love interest. But regardless, I just find their dynamic very amusing. And at the very end, I put, yay, she got to see her dad with like little hearts, because it's just so sweet and I'm so happy for her. But then I wrote, does he know something? He's very calm. For somebody whose daughter was kidnapped and is only just getting to visit him for a bit, he seems quite calm about the situation and her in general. Maybe he just knows that she is very resilient and that she's probably fine. In fact, maybe because she's sort of elevated her station, maybe she's even doing better than him. He does seem to live very modestly, which seems surprising, because you would think, unless they're just not very valued in their society, you would think somebody with as much knowledge as he has would be valued more. But he seems to not be living the most comfortable life. And she even notes and thinks, oh, I wish he wouldn't have to work in the fields all the time. So I don't really know exactly why that's his situation currently. But he does seem very calm. So I'm wondering if there's more with that. And then the last thing, too, I had once again repeated, is he the younger brother, in reference to Jinshi? And then also I was wondering how old Gaoshin is. Because the way he looks, the way he's drawn, I didn't think he was that old, but the way he talks, especially in reference to Jinshi, he kind of seems like he's a lot older. So maybe he's way older than I realized. It doesn't matter. I think he's such a precious man. I love that character so much. Just quietly, like, a little fatigued of Jinshi. Anyway, then we get to episode 8, which is called Wheat Stalks. And I wrote, oh no, the courtesan and the customer. Which, by the way, I didn't feel that bad after when you discover that the guy is really sleazy and he uses the women. I mean, I don't know that I thought, like, oh yeah, he should eat it. But it's not the greatest guy. At first I was like, oh no, were they in love and then someone poisoned them as revenge or something? I didn't know. So when I found out, I was like, oh, all right, well, she was in on it. I did really like the reveal about the way that the drink, how some drinks can obviously have part of it settling at the bottom and then the rest at the top, and that the courtesan used a straw. I was like, oh, clever. That's clever. Anyway, moving into the next points about this episode, though, I put, her trying to impress her dad when he's kind of quizzing her on, well, what happens, though, with the tobacco, and he's trying to present so she can think through all the situations. Also, previously, I didn't mention this, but you see this character hesitant to say anything based purely on conjecture. You see her specifically telling herself, don't just have an idea and a potential assumption that you relay as if it is fact, because that can lead to a lot of problems. She is thinking this in reference to, you see in episode 3 of the show, when she has some suspicions based off of her knowledge about what's happened with the brothels and some of the women there in the past and how one pretended to be ill. And then she's wondering if that similar situation is occurring. And then you see where that originated from, because he is encouraging her to do this in this moment, to not just jump to conclusions. And I really liked that we got a piece of how her father has influenced her before you really saw. I think it just kind of furthers that feeling that she is a well-developed character, because we were inserting things before they were necessarily relevant, if that makes sense. As an example, this is a goofy example, but sometimes in sitcoms, they'll present a personality quirk about a character for that episode as it pertains to whatever the silly, 20-minute long arc is for that episode, and then that little quirk is never really referenced again. And this is an example of the opposite of that. You're showing me who this character is, and then when you see them with their parent, you see where they have gotten some of their behaviors and ways of thinking from. So I really wanted to compliment that element of this. I did write my notes, whoa, in reference to the little girl with the knife, and that is when everything is revealed regarding this particular customer. From there, we kind of just see Mao Mao having the conclusion like, well, I guess I know the situation now, and it seems as though there is just danger everywhere. There are people that are manipulative everywhere, and she's just very almost apathetic in this regard, and I'm curious what has caused that. I don't know if it's just a sense of detachment to try and persevere, but she does... I think naturally she's not the most extroverted. She doesn't necessarily express, unless it's about poisons and food related things. But otherwise, she doesn't necessarily express outwardly that much. She doesn't, when she has emotions, they're not big all the time. And I do think this felt different from that. This felt like she was going out of her way to avoid, I guess you could say, internalizing the trauma that she just witnessed and allowing it to traumatize her, but I don't know if it's the healthiest. I do feel like there's something there with her character. Or maybe I'm reading into it a little too much. I don't know. But the show is already showing me like pieces of a lot of depth, so I imagine that there's more to her in this way. But I also wrote, I wish her dad wasn't all alone when she has to leave. I was like, aw, can there be somebody with him? That makes me really sad. And then at the end, I loved the stupid last scene where she's talking to Jinshi and he's very butthurt about the fact that she went to somebody else with their hairpin. She's like, well, I didn't want to rely on you. And he's very like, And then he's like, well, what did you do? And then she tells him that she gave the guy a night of blissful dreams, and then him just dropping the cup and it going into that ridiculous little cartoon. I mean, I know all of it's animated, but the little silly cartoon drawings of them where they're tiny and their heads are huge. And then she's like, oh, here, I think you spilled some. And it's just great. That scene was so stupid and so funny. I loved it. And then now into episode 9, which was titled Suicide or Murder. And the way it kicks off is interesting because it almost seems like it's tied to the episode we just watched. It almost seems like it's more about the episode we just watched than the one that we're getting. But I do think that we kind of have these parallels to show life outside the palace and life in the palace aren't that different from each other. The specific notes I have: youth is a scary thing. And I put, haha, I love Gaoshin. I love that character. And that does solidify that he's older than I realize. But I just don't know how old. And then the next quote, stop spoiling my nostalgia with reality. I really like this quote because I feel that this is something you could so easily turn into. I'm not saying I like it because it seems meme-worthy, but it's just so applicable to so many things. I really, really enjoyed that. And then I felt really bad for, you do find out in this episode that there is somebody who, I'm not sure what his name was, but he was this respected person who lost a wife and a child. He's been known to drink a lot. That's kind of the mystery of this episode. And the conclusion is just somebody must have been putting a lot of salt in his beer, but he has developed this means of not tasting salt, so he couldn't tell, and then he died. And they're kind of like, oh, it must have just been like a prank gone wrong. And I was like, I don't know. That seems like quite the prank gone wrong. I think there might be something else to that. But it seems like Jinshi really cared about him. I don't know if we'll get further context to that, but it seemed like he was really sad about that individual passing away. Anyway, and then you discover that Mao Mao loves booze. And that's another great scene about this episode, and just her in general is just her like, ha. So now we know she loves her poisons. There's certain kinds of food she seems to really like. And booze. She really, really likes her booze. The last thing I wrote was the other concubine. I didn't quite catch her name. I think it's Duo. That concubine. I have her name, and then I put, is it his mom? And then that's where I left off. The one concubine, I feel like, looks like him. I was like, wait, hold on. If I'm right, that Jinshi... But then I'm kind of confused a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little confused about who the emperor's... Who was... Because there's the whole thing about the one concubine who's really young. I didn't really comment on her too much. But there's one concubine who's really, really young. The one that you find out has that allergic reaction. She's only 14, and she was a concubine when she was 9. However, from what we understand, she was never touched. But there's like this idea that it's really shameful to have been a concubine for the father and then now the son. So she's somebody who's been a concubine for a while, but thankfully has not been approached to be intimate with, from what I've gathered. However, there's other concubines, and I'm kind of a little confused about which ones are currently with the emperor and which ones were with the previous emperor. But I feel like Jinshi's the prince, and I feel like that's his mom. I guess I'll find out. Anyway, that's it for episodes 5 through 9. I can't wait to watch more of this show. It is delightful. It's charming. It's beautiful. The music, the colors, the architecture, the details in basically everything and in every scene. I think it's great. I love our characters. I'm having such a good time with it, while simultaneously finding there to be so much depth within it. And it very much is one of those things where the beauty is only skin deep, you could say, if we're being metaphorical about it. I'm adoring this show. I think it's so fun. I can't wait to watch more. Thanks so much for watching, though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.